Dungeons and Dragons, Satan's Game. These are the experiences of two individuals as we fight our way through various evil and blood-soaked horrors known as D&D. Look and weep at the evil that awaits us. Will we survive the horrors?
I hope so.
Spoiler warning for those of you who dare to set foot. You will be spoiled.
Oh, yes.
But we'll see you at the D&D game.
Greetings! You're watching SeptumSin versus the World. I'm SeptumSin. I'm here with Kotobuki Jake and a guest, Dave, from Inside Movies Galore and Delusions of Grandeur. Now, this is another episode of Tabletop Horror. So today's film is going to be a film called, I'm going to actually temporarily full screen me, Life with a Dice Bag. Or with the Dice Bag, I should say. And this is the actual physical copy here. It comes with a trailer. That is the special feature involved. I was introduced to Life with a Dice Bag. Let me see if I can do this real quick. There we go. But to me, there I am. I was introduced to Life with a Dice Bag by IMDb when I saw they had a list of like 100 tabletop related movies. And I pulled some of mine from that list, and some didn't have anything to do with tabletop at all. But that's all I've got on that. The background of this, I have no clue as to what went into this, as to why they did it, as to what it was there, but their timing was quite amazing. Because this particular one is a gaming documentary about mainly tabletop gaming, and Gen Con as it was reaching its final year in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And it moved, I think that was 2002, 2003. I can't remember exactly what year that they moved it. This film was released 2003, but that doesn't mean that was when it was filmed. And I have actually, you know what? I've got notes. Why am I doing this without the notes? There we go. Life with a Dice Bag. So yeah, it's not really a lot of notes on here, but again, I think it's pretty cool that you get to see a piece of history there, that they actually decided to do this documentary right as it was moving to Indianapolis. So, and that was a big thing. I remember hearing about it. But let me try and move over to some of our others. And let's start with my co-host, Jake, and ask you how you first heard about this film.
Well, I heard about this film when you sent me the link and said I needed to watch it.
There's going to be a lot of these films, I have a feeling. Not all of them, though. Not all of them.
I'm trying to... apologies for the blinding light in the back. I can't really figure out a better way to... Yeah, whatever. Hopefully it'll work. Yeah, this was definitely my first time with this one, and it's interesting.
This is our first gaming documentary on the series.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Dave, did you hear about this film before I told you about it?
Before you told me about it, no. Gen Con, yes. And I was actually introduced to tabletop gaming around the time this documentary was being filmed. So I was aware that there was a Gen Con and all that jazz, but not before the link that you sent me did I watch this film. And I watched it a week ago. In fact, a week and 2 days ago. In preparation for last Monday, but Monday didn't happen. So
yeah, we had issues.
Yeah, we had issues. But I was entertaining for what it was, but I wish we had an update on where everything sits now, you know.
Well, it's in Indianapolis now. It's bigger than ever in Indianapolis, but, you know. So essentially, this starts off with a cute little tutorial. Matter of fact, the only thing plot-wise we have in this documentary is this little animated section at the beginning where it gives you an introduction to D&D and role-playing. And tell you the truth, I really wouldn't have wanted to play in that dude's game that was rolling it. But who wants to talk about that section? It's probably the only like plot-like section that was in this. So
it sounded very familiar to certain games.
It did sound very familiar to a certain game that we were playing not too long ago in a galaxy not so far away.
I did find it interesting how they gave the GM like the wrestling event announcer voice. I was like, okay.
With a little crude animation on top of it. It's like, your character is dead.
It looks like most of the players are actually from either Chicago and Milwaukee, because it seems like there's a whole group of them that were just sitting in the background. Some of them said they were from Chicago. Some of them were from Milwaukee, but they all seem to group together and have fun doing it. They sounded like they were having a blast.
And from what I've heard, one of the few things about the background of this I've heard is that a lot of the filmmakers are from Wisconsin. So I know, and that is probably the reason why that is the reason I brought you on, Dave, because I know you do have a fascination with filmmakers that are from Wisconsin.
Well, and I can go into a sort of explanation why I think Gen Con entirely left Milwaukee. It's one of two reasons to me. One was that it was just getting so larger than life, it needed more space. Two, there's a scenario that happens here in Milwaukee because of karaoke. As well. You have karaoke at a bar, right? And oftentimes the singers will come and they will basically come for the karaoke but not spend any money at the bar.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't make them or the vendors any money whatsoever. It's the same thing with gamers. The whole reason why a place thrives is because not only of food and stuff from the vendor, they want people to spend money, and that's the thing. People were going there just to oogle, and have a blast. They didn't want, and I think that's what eventually happened. You had a whole bunch of fans not spending money, and a whole lot of spaces that were being taken up by many different fans, and there were a lot of people who in the genre that wanted a space there, and so to me it was a viable solution to go up and out to a better space and whatnot. I get it. There was some people saying there was a controversy that they didn't want certain things there, but in all honesty, it was probably a better move for them to begin with. But
they mention it in the doc. The person who worked, I think the person worked in a hotel or something, and they were talking about the difference in the gamers who came to use the hotels and the nearby facilities, bars and stuff, versus other groups. And of course, we've had our own firsthand experience, unfortunately, with that, with the shop that we used to game out all the time. And basically, they kind of got their diss in on the card users. But yeah, it was basically like the Magic and other similar games. You're constantly spending money on those. So when they started taking over the shop, it was like, what are they going to do? This is the group that spends money, so it's like, yeah.
Yep. And they did go over that. There was one other thing, and I have a little bit of experience on that as well from local. But yeah, they also had talked about that, what you said, Dave, but also talked about the idea that a lot of these people got kind of, they were all dressed up, so they kind of got looked down on by a lot of the locals, which that happened in Richmond. Anime Mid-Atlantic used to be housed in Richmond and left around the same time, actually. I went 3 times, I think, to that con. It was really cool that we had an anime con in Richmond City. I have pictures, actually, so it's proof that I was there.
Yeah, it would have been cool if I knew about it or cared at the time, but now,
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there is always that one group of people who just get rowdy and insult whatever place they're at. So there's always that chance that there are the ones that go and respect places, and then there's the other that just kind of disrespect the place and don't give a shit about anybody else's feelings or whatnot. So to me, there is always a group of people that is going to be obnoxious that you don't want around, and I think there's that type of group in any type of event that you're at, no matter where you go.
I was saying that's any con that you really can think of, but I look at it like I say with Anime Mid-Atlantic. A lot of the stuff was there were people saying that they hated having the people in costume around, that they didn't want these freaks hanging around the hotel, which I'm like, well, shoot, I understand, but those are my people, so I can't really be there. But as far as gamers are concerned, I also understand that, because as gamers, we don't have money. Most of us don't. So, we can't buy like $100 meal at the steak joint to contribute to the city. But you have a lawyers convention; those lawyers can do that.
We spent all our money on the latest update of Dungeons and Dragons just the day before. So, right?
Indeed. So that was one of the big things that they talked about, but they had a few other things they touched on. Though most of this took place at Gen Con. And I'm gonna dwell one more on Gen Con itself. I loved how they were able to get Gary Gygax while he was still alive, which he was very much alive back then. So, that was there. But having him on lent an air of legitimacy to the documentary. I liked how he talked about the early Gen Con, where it was like 20 to 50 people total. And he's like, it's amazing how it's gotten from that to this giant thing. Even Comic Con was like teeny tiny at the beginning. And now Gen Con is a moneymaker, because it brings not just the nerds with no money, but it brings movie stars. It brings all this stuff. It's pretty big these days. I don't know if Wisconsin cares now, but Indianapolis is happy for it, so I guess that makes sense. But you never know what you got until it's gone. But that wasn't the only thing there. They covered a couple other cool things there. They were very big on trying to tackle stereotypes of gamers and saying, yes, the stereotype does exist, but no, not all gamers are the stereotype. And I was very happy to see that and have them showing gamers of all different types throughout that, including the female gamers, which they dwelled on a lot with them. And that one girl was like, who had talked about her group, but they had a whole female group because, they wanted to get away from kind of the toxic men and some of that. But I did like that you got people who showed these different groups role-playing, groups that you don't normally think of when you think the typical, D&D geek, the fat, unhygienic person living in their mother's basement,
Yeah.
So what did y'all think about that?
Well, I do like the fact that they did show the other side of the spectrum, because oftentimes your significant other is not interested in your hobbies or what you do, and I think it's nice to display that there are girls into playing these tabletop games and cards and whatnot. And over time, I've seen different sides to different spectrums and different people all over the board just playing different games. I mean, it all depends on what's in at that point in time. Of course, in 2003, Magic the Gathering was in.
Yeah.
So, and I was part of that Magic the Gathering uprising a little bit, but I had started out in Dungeons and Dragons myself. So I got out of doing it some years back, but then Brandon, you kind of got me back into doing it. So
Then I lost all the time to do it.
But,
so what did you think, Jake, of the...
I hope we'll eventually get back.
Yes. Well, Jake, what did you think of the variety of people and stuff on display there? Did you feel like they represented?
More or less, I suppose. I feel like they did do a pretty good cross-section. I feel like now, if they were to do this now, there would probably be a broader cross-section that could be referenced. Almost certainly could be a broader cross-section now, actually. But, for the time, I think they did a pretty good job. I did find it kind of interesting, some of the opinions that they did get. Some people, I don't know, there was like one dude in particular that I kept going, oh, come on, dude, just get over your, like, there were a couple that had some interesting opinions on it. But overall, they did a pretty good job doing a broad cross-section that I think at least slightly tested the perception,
And yeah, Third Ed just had started up at the time. I think it was like only 2 or 3 years into Third Ed, because Third Ed I think was 2001. And that was the system that really brought outsiders in. It was simpler. It was easier to understand for the most part. They didn't have the complex charts and Thacos. Thaco. But also, I noticed one other thing that makes me feel old is that all these younger gamers that were there, I realized that all of these younger gamers are about the same age I was that year that was filmed. So they're almost all in their upper 30s or 40s at this point. Probably more, maybe in their mid 40s to 50s for some. Time passes on. But I could have very well been one of those gamers over at Gen Con. I actually had a couple that, I don't know. Do you remember Rick and Laura, Jacob? Did I introduce you?
Who?
Rick and Laura. I knew them at Warner, but I don't know if you were introduced because you weren't really gaming with us at the time.
Yeah, I couldn't swear to it.
Because it was me, Rocky, and Ben and Tom. I know you know all of them. We would go over to their place. They had an apartment in Roanoke, and they also had an apartment in Covington back when I first met them. But they moved over to Roanoke because Rick was with the military. And they ran a really good game, but they always ran a game at Gen Con. They had like a game that they had done, and they were like big into it. I mean, Laura had these maps, like extensive, all hexed out of their entire world they generated. So that you could go anywhere in the world, all the cities, all the places. It was just like quite impressive. And I missed gaming with them. They were fun to game with. I mean, Rick was a punster, unfortunately, but I've gamed with worse than that. But it was neat having a game with all of them. It was kind of weird with Tom. Tom was not one I expected. Not the Tom from the gaming group, but Tom from Roanoke. Tom never struck me as a gamer, but he was very much into it when we were doing it.
I do vaguely recall Tom. He was there when we went to visit Rocky and Nina in Cleveland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about. The others I'm having trouble visualizing.
Ben was kind of this short, stocky, nerdy guy.
Actually, I think I might know who you're talking about with him. Yeah.
Rocky rode with him once and said, I can't do that again. He's going to kill me because he was driving 20 miles an hour on the interstate. But yeah, I remember them talking about Gen Con all the time, and that was before they moved. So that's actually pretty cool. I mean, this is a part of history here. Does anybody have anything else that they thought was interesting about the documentary itself? Not like the way it was filmed or anything. We'll get into that in a minute. But like any information, anything that you thought was interesting.
I did like how they were able to talk to a few of the convention dudes that were there at Gen Con. I thought that was unique. As far as the group, because I think they kind of like went around the room, and they talked about how they got into gaming and whatnot. I thought that was kind of cool that we got like different variety of people explaining their ways that they got into it, and you could tell there were definitely a couple of true great gamers that they had, like that one, the one that definitely did look like he was part of that whole living in his mother's basement kind of thing. Which I know it's a stereotype, but if you look at the collections behind them or whatnot, you kind of sort of have to wonder at times. But that doesn't mean that he living in his mother's basement. But you could tell he's that kind of type. That the outside person would be like, "There's that guy that lives in his mother's basement." But other than that, I think it was kind of a straightforward, like, slice of life look at, what it's like being a gamer, and what it's like going to get Gen Con, and what it means to them, and what it meant to them leaving. That type of thing.
Well, what about you, Jake? Is there anything else you want to talk about the information they gave or anything like that?
Not a lot. I was kind of amused by that married couple where, like, she was just so straightforward and gung-ho, and he's sitting there kind of like almost like I don't know. It was almost like he was embarrassed his wife was so into it, and I'm like, that's kind of, I think you should be thrilled about that. It's kind of weird, but they kind of amused me. And like I said, there was the one dude that just frustrated the crap out of me. He kept going on about, he was talking about going to the cons and having beautiful women selling him stuff, and it made him uncomfortable. And I'm like, I like it. I don't, it's like, well, I don't know.
I get what he was trying to say is that he was feeling like, one, he liked the idea of having that safe space for gamers, and he felt like people were trying to basically manipulate him.
Yeah,
it's kind of like if you walk into a bar and there's that everyday average woman bartending, and then the next day you walk into the bar and and the bar owner has updated the bar with hot chicks. You know,
well, yeah, you're going to
you know,
you're going to spend more money. Yeah, I mean that's a given. It's and I would admit, like if we were talking something like Comiket, and like I was going around to the Dojin booths and the hot women, that I'd feel a little uncomfortable. But just like, but then again, maybe not. Who knows? But it's I don't know. I just felt like that was one they kind of kept coming back to him, and he kept digging that hole deeper and deeper.
Yeah,
I did like getting to hear some stuff directly from Gary Gygax. I can't remember if I've seen anything with him before. He definitely seemed like a cool dude, and it was interesting hearing some of his personal take on it. But other than that, nothing really leapt out at me, I guess. I think as far as information about gaming and stuff, I don't think there was much that was new, like for me.
True.
But I could imagine if someone was coming to this blind, then they would probably get a fair bit from it. Yeah.
Well, and they did touch on the Satanic Panic, which I can't leave out because Jake and I were knee deep in Satanic Panic for a little while for this series. And, and we might go back into it because I had found a movie that was actually predating some of this stuff. So we'll probably be doing that as our next episode, even though it will air prior to this because of the year. So it's going to be interesting. But I know you're looking forward to seeing another one of those type of movies, like Skullduggery and Mazes and Monsters, such great films. But let's talk about the visual quality. I wrote in there, it's like, it looks ancient was my comment. It's like you could tell that they were definitely filming on old technology, but it was like the early 2000s, so I guess it makes sense. I keep thinking of early 2000s as recent, but it's not. It's 20 years ago.
Yeah, it is.
But it definitely...
How depressing is that?
Definitely older school technology. When I'm used to like clear stuff like that, you could tell that it was kind of grainy. The sound was kind of a little bit off on some of the things.
Actually, yeah, I'm going to talk. If we're going to mention that, the sound design on this was awful.
Yeah,
it was absolutely awful. There were
totally agree.
I do think for the most part they recorded the sound decently, but there were some people who were really hard to understand. There were some areas where the sound mix was off, but honestly, one of the worst things is I did like the music. Overall, I liked the music, but it was always there. It's like they just had a constant background of music that, depending on how the sound was mixed, either dominated or was distracting in almost every scene. They clearly did not use it judiciously.
Yeah, somebody who's been trying to get the sound and the music right, and for the most part getting it for Amityville webcam. There's a couple of scenes that are iffy, but I think that's more because of what we were filming on. Like I have one scene with you where you're echoing a little bit when we're going through, but I'm like, I just have to deal with it. Can't fix it. But yeah, I can understand their pain, but still, it's kind of cool to see it. This is one of the earliest D&D documentaries that I have access to. We are going to be covering more, or at least me and Jake are, in the future, and more in this season, because I believe Uber Goober is going to be in this season. And that was my first RPG documentary that I saw, which is pretty cool. I got that one at Jack's. So I actually learned about that one long before this series. So I can actually say something that's like, no, I wasn't researching the series when I found this, which I can't say for like 90% of these I found when I was researching for the series. So that's going to be fun. So let's do some final thoughts before we get into the numbers. I'll give mine first, as always, which is, as it just kind of, this feels like a kind of group of people who were into RPGs, and they were like, darn it, Gen Con is here for one more year. Let's get together. Let's make an epic RPG documentary. We're going to put it on DVD, and it's going to be awesome. And darned if they didn't accomplish it, and it was okay. So, that's my thought. Did a good enough job. Decent enough watch. Would definitely watch again in the future. We'll go with you next, Jake.
Basic impressions, you said?
Yeah, basically your final thoughts, impressions.
Final thoughts. Okay, well, I already gave my thoughts on the sound and the music. I was amused by that animated sequence near the beginning. Like I said, I was of two minds about the use of the wrestling announcer voice for the GM. It amused me, but also kind of puzzled me and seemed, I guess it worked. You do feel for the various people that got roped into that game, and it's amazing that there weren't more outcries of anger and disappointment. But
well, it kind of turned on him at the end of it.
As far as the documentary itself, it was a decent documentary. I mean, I think they did a pretty good job in terms of presentation, in terms of editing it in a way where it's a relatively, I guess you could say, coherent narrative. They probably hit on a few points more than they needed to, and maybe not as much clarity as they could have in other points, but I've seen much worse documentaries.
All right. Well, and Dave, your final thoughts.
Final thoughts is, I'm glad that there is a documentary about the final days of Gen Con in and from Milwaukee, because I got into the tail end of the dying down days of the tabletop gaming here in Milwaukee for Gen Con. So that being said, this documentary was okay. It did look like a group of friends got together and decided to have fun talking about why they got into it. But I also think it ended up being kind of a dig against and kind of a whine against Gen Con leaving Milwaukee and their reasons why. And like I said earlier, I think it was a mixture of things. So, that being said, at the end of the day, I am glad that I saw this. It is a little bit of Milwaukee history. I wish I could at least find a copy of this so that I could have it in my own collection, since I am from Milwaukee and born from Milwaukee, but that's okay. I am glad that I saw this. If any of you find a copy of this for me, it would be a great birthday present, or Christmas present, or whatever.
I will tell you, this was a hunt.
I bet it was.
And some of these actually are very big on hunt. I mean, we talked about Games Master, what have you done? I have only seen one copy in existence, and that is unless you count the VHS that I saw. But I've only seen one DVD copy in existence, and it's the one I have. This one I've seen occasionally pop up on Amazon and very rarely pop up on eBay. So all I can say is just keep looking as it goes, and maybe somebody put it up.
Well, I found one in Nostalgia Critics DVD IDs and out in the wild, so who knows?
Yep. Well, we'll be covering one from him, actually. I'm probably in season 2, believe it or not. So, and that one will be very much a LARPing-centered one.
I was amused. at the end of it. So thank you for letting me see it.
Anytime you want to come on with us, Dave, you're always welcome. And of course, my hope is that you will join me for my Amityville series, as we will do that, and maybe Jake will join us on occasion for that. Because we will actually have one film in common with Amityville and this series, which is Amityville Webcam. Because not only is it an Amityville film, it is a role-playing film at the same time. So, with that being said, of course, we've got to end this on our notes, on our ratings. We have 3 ratings, so this could go anywhere this time. So our first of the 2 ratings is our tabletop rating. This is a 1 to 10 rating. It's based on how much this relates to the tabletop genre. And I would say 9 out of 10. And not only does it teach you how to play D&D, it names it. It shows a role-playing Gen Con of people doing art there. The only reason why I don't give it a 10 out of 10 is it's not 100% tabletop. But it is a lot of tabletop, and it's about tabletop, and it's about the people who play tabletop. So that's really good. So 9 out of 10 for me. And I'll have Jake go next. That way Dave has a full gamut of what we show.
Well,
1 out of 10.
Yeah. Now, from the tabletop perspective, I think 9 out of 10 does sound good. It certainly is about tabletop gaming. It focuses pretty solidly on tabletop gaming, but it also does try to get in a lot into the people who do it. It gets into sort of the gaming lifestyle, that kind of thing. And as Dave alluded to, one could also say the politics of deciding whether an event should go on or not. So it does stray a little bit from a pure tabletop movie. And it does give you a lot of information about it, but it doesn't really show a whole lot of actual gaming going on. So honestly, I would say a low 9 at best, but I think we can go with that.
Yeah, if anything, the opening was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what about you, Dave? What would you rate it?
I'm going to say 7 out of 10 because at least it was focusing a lot on the idea of tabletop and how people got into it. It didn't. I would have wanted to have them go through an actual game of tabletop, a full-on game, where you actually see the game start from Game Master intro to Game Master ending.
So Critical Role, I guess.
Yeah, Critical Role, even to the part where maybe they describe how you roll for your character and all that jazz, and go through some of that. Now, if they'd have done that, then I would have given it a 9 out of 10.
So, like, Games Master, what have we done? Where the guy's rolling for his stats for the Paladin. 1 in strength. How do I do that with 3d6?
Exactly. You want your audience to learn more about tabletop and vice versa. If they gone that way of it, then I'd have given it a 9 out of 10. But since they didn't do any of that, and they just did kind of like a greatest hits of it, it got the 7 out of 10 rating for me. So I'm sorry if I'm a little bit critical, but I tend not to put things on pedestals, even though this is kind of a unique niche of a documentary. So
we're all critics here, Dave. You know. But
I'm a reviewer. I don't call myself a critic, and normally I don't do things by numbers because I think it's more insulting. But you forced my hand here.
Well, and again, this is not a rating to how good or bad it is. It's more of a tabletop rating. But overall, this gets an 8.333333333333333, which we round that down to an 8. So it is an 8 for role-playing. So the next would be LARPing. So LARPing, or live action role-playing, where a bunch of people kind of dress up and they do their thing. There is a little bit of it, and a little bit of it is explained here, but there's not a lot of it. Like when I say a little bit, it's like, hey, let's talk a little bit about that. And there's a lot of cosplay, which we have talked about as kind of next to LARPing in a way, because you're technically, and some of these people were kind of into their characters. So I would give it
an added thing to nerddom.
I would give it maybe a 5. That's generous. 4. No, 5, because they did explain LARPing. So I will give it a 5 out of 10, because at least they told you what it was. They just didn't dwell on it. We're going to get to some 8 and 9s out of 10 later, though, as we go. As a matter of fact, I think there's one called Draken. That is a big one that we're getting to. But what about you, Jake? What would you give to LARPing?
Well, like you said, they do show some cosplay. But I don't think they showed anyone actually gaming in costume. And they mentioned it, but they didn't really go into it. So maybe a 3, between a 3 and 4. I'm trying to decide where to land. That'd be generous. 4.
Right.
So 3.5 for him.
How about you, Dave? What would you rank?
A low 4.
All right. Equals that divided by 3. So it will be a 4. A 4 for LARPing. There wasn't a lot of it in there, so, but we are going to be getting to ones that are higher in LARPing. Have we had any high LARPing score ones? I mean, Mazes and Monsters had a little bit, but
I don't recall. We've had a couple mid-level ones, I think.
Because they actually did LARP in Mazes and Monsters. That was actually live action role-playing that they did. But that's the only one I can remember they actually did it and called it that. So I think it's the only other one that's called it by name anyway. But we're going to get to others as we go. Well, this was our show for today. But I hope you all enjoyed Dave and his presence. Maybe he'll be back in the future for other episodes. Of course, if you want to see more of Dave, you should subscribe to his 2 channels, Inside Movies Galore and Delusions of Grandeur, which are always linked down below. You can look at any episode of this, and there will always be a link to those 2 channels, because we are, I call them like companion channels, because, well, I'm not on Delusions of Grandeur, but I am on Inside Movies Galore, and so is Jake. Sometimes Rosie as well.
Oh, hey, Rosie.
But
incidentally, we'll be doing a movie of my pick on tonight's Movies Galore discussion. So
yeah, it's too bad that by the time this comes out, well, who knows? Maybe it will be coming around a pick of yours at the time. But
there's no reason they can't go look it up.
You'll go back to the Kingpin episode. You'll get an idea as to when we actually record this.
That's true. It's going to be a hot minute before this one comes out. But anyway,
unless we actually cover it again before we get there. So I hope you all have enjoyed this. If you did, click that like button, hit that subscribe. Unless you bought this on the DVD, then go to my channel and Dave's channel, and I guess Jake's channel, though he hasn't updated in ages, and hit that subscribe, like, and share. Maybe if you guys can get Jake's channel up to like 1,000 subscribers, maybe he'll film a new episode. But we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.